Hi, like I said, my name is Kate Jacobs. I was the main sound designer on Lynked banner of the Spark, and I'm going to be talking today about a couple different systems that I kind of spearheaded throughout the project and the systems I put in place for that. As you can see here, very serious work. I put a video up here just to kind of convey the tone for this part of the presentation. This is me, really nice sourdough loaf from Bread's Bakery. We were doing, the robots were eating to power up as they joined you in battle. Someone gave me dental insurance to do this. So, first big system I'm going to talk about here was our weapon system. As you saw from Linked, we were saying kind of a cozy lethal game, we called it. It's about 30% cozy, but 70% combat. So quite a lot of weapons. If you haven't played Linked yet, first of all, great game, would recommend going and getting it. But also, here's just a quick overview of some of the combat. So the first thing when it came to planning for the weapon sound design, there was a problem. The problem was Linked has 10 unique weapon classes. We have very simple kind of classic video game stuff like one-handed swords and two-handed bashers. We also have more unique weapon types like battle hoverboards and giant throwing stars. So these are basic, like fundamentally change your play style in the game. For each of those 10 weapon classes, there can be up to 11 different brands. These are all buddy weapons at the top, but like for the one-handed sword, there's also a Magitech version and a combat version, and these all came with cosmetic changes, but most of the time also different pre-installed mods, different special attacks, all of which also required additional audio content. In addition to those weapons with those brands, we also had these cores. These were elemental cores that you could attach to any weapon you had at any time. If I had my one-handed sword and I put a fire core into it, suddenly that sword is doing fire damage. The VFX represent that, and the audio has to follow. So I went to music school, so I'm not great with math, but that's about 500 plus unique weapons to design audio for, which, as we refer to it in the industry, is not feasible to do, especially given everything Ronnie just said about scope and timing. So we had this problem and we needed a plan. So the plan for this was to make a small amount of audio assets and see how far we could really stretch that limited supply before we started creating additional unique audio. The idea was for all the melee weapons to create 3 different sizes of whooshy generic swipes, light, medium, and heavy, do a couple variations on each, and then recreate those for each elemental core. So we had a few versions of a light default swipe, a few versions of a light fire swipe, and so on. And put this grid up just to see, for the combo attacks, for the charge attacks, for the specials, how far could we stretch this audio. We also had, for the ranged weapons, which originally was going to be the blaster and the guitar, but as you can see from all these yellow unique sticky notes on guitar, that went a different way. But for the blasters, we had a small and a large blast swipe for those as well. So the idea was to create this limited set of audio, tag all the animations with it, and see if it became too monotonous or if it helped with the minimizing the work on the weapon design. So remove audio only when necessary. This is a quick video kind of comparing. This is going to go through the sword, which is our kind of default light one-handed weapon that uses medium stripes, and it's going to go through all the different elements. The basher is our two-handed heavy weapon. That's going to go through using the heavy swipes. And then the battle board, which is kind of a hybrid case here, it does still utilize those medium swipes to get the general core of the sound with the whooshiness and the flame sounds and everything else. But you get to ride it as the charge attack for that one, so it needed some additional design. So on top of the swipes layers, there are a bit of like motorized sounds in there. Another example of kind of trying to reuse and utilize those assets as much as we could, the fists were kind of an interesting case. The way the fists work in Linked is your basic combo attack is just kind of these big punches. Your charge attack is actually just a heavy set of combos. So when you do your charge attack, the fists extend on giant cables and you swing them around like pendulums. So the heavy swipes worked really well for that charge attack. For the lighter combo attack though, it was a bit of a Goldilocks situation where the heavy swipes were too intense and the medium swipes were not intense enough. So I originally was just going to try to create another set, like a few variations on the fault, a few variations for all the different cores. But the first thing I tried was just in Wise. I took that heavy, the actor mixer was basically an actor mixer with a switch container that had all the different elements in it. I just duplicated the one we had for heavy swipes, labeled it heavy large, and created a new one called heavy small. And all I did here was on the top level of the actor mixer, I increased the pitch of it, which in Wise increases both the pitch and the speed, and then added a bit of a high pass, just to make it feel a little bit smaller without having to generate a whole new set of audio. And that took care of the problem. The fist sounded great, and I didn't need to create maybe like 40 or 50 more audio assets. Benefits of this overall, enormous reduction to overall workload, as Ronnie outlined very carefully. We had a small team, we had a limited timeline, we had a lot of stuff to get done, and this took probably a lot of time out of the weapon system. In addition to taking time off in the process of making these sounds, it also really helped going forward. We had new weapons get added to the game while we were still developing, post-EA support DLC. And when those new weapons or new specials got added, it was really easy to just go into the animation and add those existing audio assets. I think very little. We had one new special called Spicy Smeatball, where you took your guitar and flung a giant smeatball across the map. That one needed special audio, but pretty much everything else was able to reuse that audio. And as you probably saw from the videos we've shown so far, Linked combat can get really chaotic, especially in the Sludgestone Bridge biome where you have lots of hordes of small enemies. Keeping it simple and kind of cohesive, this unified sound between the weapons actually really helped it cut through the mix. I think if there had been more nuance, it would have at best gotten lost and at worst muddled up the overall soundscape. So this ended up working really well from that point of view too. So that's everything. There's nothing else to worry about with the weapons except this guy, the Resonator. It's a guitar weapon. That's awesome. I think when I was doing sound design for this was around the time that Hi-Fi Rush had just come out, the best game of all time. So I was really excited to do some guitar sounds. I play guitar. Embodying the idea of music in the future, the year 30XX, I had some really cool creative liberty with that. I had a lot of big ideas at the beginning about like wanting every hit to play a note that matched up with the soundtrack. That wasn't going to work. Zach created an immense body of music for Linked. It is so diverse melodically and harmonically within pieces, let alone between pieces, between biomes. There is, Ryan said it was like 30 minutes of dynamic combat music, and I could not make a weapon that was diatonic to every second of it in the time we had, because I think this was leading up to our beta test, and I had like a month to do it. So good luck on that. So these were two initial passes. This first one was like right after the weapon went into the game. It was using one Unreal audio asset for every attack, and it was driving everyone crazy. So this was just like very quickly get something in. So those are all like real recorded guitar sounds from myself and one of our level designers, Bruno, who very graciously donated some sick guitar audio. This was fine. It was serviceable. If we had to ship the game with it, it would have been okay. But it was honestly too realistic for the world of Linked. It was a bit generic for how stylized everything is here. So once we got to actually trying to design for the Resonator, once all the cosmetics and everything were in, this was my like first real attempt at trying to match the audio pillars of Linked. So initial feedback on this was that it sounded kind of broken, which I think is apt feedback. It just sounded a little too glitched out. I think I got too weird with it. And the other, again, that's all guitar and only guitar. The other problem I was having with it was that it was not impactful enough for a weapon. You know, when you hit things with a weapon, which is what this is first and foremost, it wants to like, the sound should feel good, and it wasn't really feeling forceful. This is me on my 5th birthday. Thinking, I wish there was some toy from my childhood I could suddenly remember in this moment that would crack this sound and conundrum wide open. That was a real wish I made on my 5th birthday. I didn't know what it meant then, but I knew in that moment what it meant. And that toy from my childhood was the Jaminator. So I have a video here that's recognized recognition. This is a brief demo of how this works. So this was my favorite thing growing up. I wrote like my first songs ever on this. But it was, you know, the most sophisticated future tech of the 90s. It was the idea in the 90s of what the future of instruments and music and toys would be. It was not just a guitar toy, it was the guitar and the drums and the keys all in one. It wasn't a guitar, it was an instrument. And that helped me, remembering that, change my mindset from this being a guitar weapon to being an instrument weapon. Percussion would add that force and impact that I was missing while still keeping it in the vein of an instrument. Bass and keys would be able to add variety and movement, and this really opened up a lot of options and possibilities. Why this made sense in the context of the game, the Resonator by design has a giant speaker in the middle of it. That is like the artist's interpretation. They did this really cool future design, and it really is more about sound than music in its visual design. The main form of attack is launching sound waves out of it. I think originally the effects were music notes, and completely unrelated to what I was doing, that changed to this because it just made more sense to have this sonic pulse coming out of it. Also, it's the future, and I can decide what the sound sounds like. So this was my favorite week at work. You saw a video where I got to eat toast. This was better. This was me collecting a bunch of insane noises and sounds to try and formulate into this weapon. So it's just a super cut of some of that. That's the moment I found the sauce. See it happen. So that's the general idea of that. For people who are guitar heads in the crowd, this was the pedal chain that I had my guitar and my bass running through. The idea here was I had a looper at the beginning. When you're typically playing guitar, this would go at the end, but I had it at the beginning so I could play in a few weird noises and sounds and then have the looper keep it going so my hands were free to tweak knobs and adjust stuff. Pretty versatile overdrive, so that at the beginning I could not only add some boost and drive to it, but I also could tone shape pretty nicely with just one knob. This was kind of the main event here was the Maris Autobit Jr., which was a bit crush and 6-step sequencing guitar pedal. The main thing I used was the sample rate knob, the filter knob, and the stutter knob. When you heard those random glitching sounds in there, that was the stutter knob. It just, you chose like a speed and a pitch differentiation, and it just kind of spat stuff back out at you. And then the main apparatus was keeping the sample rate up a bit and having the filter closed off, and then while like those slides or harmonics were happening, I would manually automate and open that filter mid-sound. And I just would keep Reaper recording for like 20 minutes at a time and try to capture whatever I could. And then on the end there, we have the Chase Post Generation Loss, which is like a tape emulation pedal, and the Habit, which they call like a musical sketch pad. I won this one in a raffle. But it basically just remembers everything you've done for like 5 minutes, and then it spits it back at you in the wildest contortions imaginable. So again, once I had stuff that I liked, I just turned that on, kept Reaper going, and saw if anything that I would never be able to recreate came out. So I had it there to cut up if I wanted to. So then, once everything was in Reaper, it came to processing the sounds. This is going to be a run through my Reaper session on just the final combo attack for the Resonator. It's going to go through, again, I have folders for guitar, bass, drums, and keys, and it's just going to go through each instrument group and then track by track to kind of show all the parts that ended up making up the sound. So I snuck a little bit of tonality in there. Two things that I did here completely for myself that probably no one will clock, so I'm going to say it out loud now. Because it is the music instrument weapon of the game, I tried to tie it into that soundtrack where I could. So the two ways I was able to do this, there is an omnichord arpeggio in every attack that the Resonator does because Zach used omnichord all over the soundtrack. And then for the charge attack, I used EBO, which for people who don't know, it just creates like a magnetic field on your guitar that infinitely sustains the string, which was good for that attack. Zach also used EBO on the final Aeternal fight, right? So that was just for me, but I thought it was a fun tie-in. And then with all that said and done, this was the final Resonator combo attack in game. Can't be wrong twice. But I forgot about the chords, these guys. Time to duplicate the Reaper session 6 times and layer all the attack sounds with the status effect audio because that's what needed to happen next. A fun thing that I learned in the process of doing that is that fire and really messed up guitar sounds sit in like a very similar frequency range and were very hard to get to cooperate together. That was a lot of EQ tweaking there, and this whole thing made me really appreciate all that Matrix stuff we did with the other swipes, because just doing this for one weapon was a huge undertaking. So once again, iterating that, trying to stretch that audio for all the other weapons was a very good use of time and forward planning. So I did that, I put all the status effect sounds on the Resonator, and it was pretty good, but it still felt like a little weird. Basically what I was feeling is this kind of oil and water thing. It felt like I had put the status effect audio on the Resonator audio, which is what I did, but it wasn't really like meshing in a way that I wanted it to. So I had a really stupid idea that I didn't think was gonna work, but it ended up kind of tying everything together. And that was, what if I reamped all the guitars for each status effect with a philosophical illustration of what guitar effects would represent that element? So, for example, for fire, I reamped all the guitars and ran them through this chain, and not just the guitars, actually all the instruments in the sound. For fire, I did a tape saturation through the Super VHS and a bit of a warm distortion tone. You know, we tend to talk about audio in these imagery-inducing words to begin with. I mean, the distortion plugin is called a radiator. They know it's evoking heat and noise and sound, and so it works for fire. For freeze, I did a low pass. Can you think of snow as more of like a soft sound, and frozen suspended reverb. The EQ that I used, Tectonic, to do the low pass had a preset called soft as snow. Again, these are things that we think about and use all the time anyways. Corrosion is like acid damage to enemies, which kind of made me think of grunge. So I did a lot of fuzz, and Crystallizer had this decaying echo, decaying acid. It all comes together. Shock just made me think of hair metal. So I did a white noise and a high octane overdrive. Hack was easy, I was just Bit Crush, because it's hack, Bit Crush. And then Sludge got fun with modulation, so some ring maid, some phaser, and a bit of tape warble. And putting all that together, that really kind of closed the loop and brought it together. So this was the final product of all those status effects into the Resonator. About weapons, because it was a lot. The other big system I'm going to talk about is the UI system we had in the game, which, as we said, is called Buddy OS. And the kind of design challenge here was designing a sleek and futuristic OS in a game about talking robots with noodle arms. This is a world, it's a post-apocalyptic world where there are next to no humans left alive. But have you seen Buddy and how he talks and how he acts? His metal defies physics with how excited he gets. So needed something that kind of crossed those two things. This is a quick overview. Again, if you haven't played Linked, it's available on all platforms now. This is a quick overview of some of the UI in game. Much calmer than the combat. So, first thing there was trying to find references. Again, was trying to do this abstract thing that combined two fairly different pieces of audio. So these were the 4 games that I found that I kind of started to pull from. Humanity was a PS4 game that was like a puzzle, navigating a bunch of humans as a little glowing dog. This had a really like bouncy and organic, closest to organic I could find feeling UI. Stray, everybody's favorite cat game, had something that was a bit more clicky and subtle. What it had in common with our game was that the UI was like the robot's in-game operating system being projected to you, the player, very similar to how Buddy worked. Ratchet & Clank had big AAA, fun, futuristic sounds going for it. And then Nier had this kind of sleek, tactile thing, especially with menu navigation. So the idea was to pull from these and get inspired by these, but still was missing this aspect of organic and playful that I was looking for the Buddy OS. In an act of like universal kismet, a week before I started doing sound design on this sample pack came out. This is a video I'm going to show a clip of it from a YouTube musician creator named David Ilowitz. He makes incredible sample packs. He finds weird old or weird new synths and instruments and just creates really high quality sample packs, usually for free, sometimes behind his Patreon. This one is completely free for anyone to go get right now. He went to a Berlin synth festival, as we all do from time to time, and Korg was showing off this prototype instrument, so I'll just show a little clip about that.
This instrument produces sound using a series of resonating metal tines, each of which is tuned to a different note. Each resonator has its own pickup and a little transducer, and when you press a button, a pulse is sent to the transducer, causing the resonator to vibrate.
Great, so this kind of hit exactly the hybrid that I had been looking for. It was like a digital kalimba, it was an acoustic synth, it was matching this digital and this organic in a really cool way. So this ended up being the basis for a lot of UI sounds in the game. This video is just the UI menu open sound that's on most of the menus in the game, and it's going to show the basic sound of the sample pack he made using the sample I used, which was just kind of like a coin collect interval. And then a lot of pitch bending, and a bit of chorus. I've learned Reaper has a built-in chorus that's not great at being like a chorus effect, but it's really good at softening out transients and mellowing out distortion a little bit. So that came into play here as well. Another way to try and keep this kind of the OS like feeling alive was using found sounds. If you couldn't tell from the toast and the guitars, I really liked finding things in my apartment to make sound effects with. So some examples here, I taped a contact mic to a real kalimba, and the tines were a little bit too resonant when I was hitting notes, so the closest thing next to me was my Yarn Yoshi amiibo, which I sat on top of it to have like a slightly muted sound, and that became the item tile focus in game. Best coworker. This is every Critical Role dice I own that I rolled into a walk to do the reroll mod sound. Not even close to the only piece of Critical Role merch I used in the sound design of this game. Another thing was this idea of keeping things unified but unique to bring, again, a sense of kind of like a liveliness into this operating system. There's a lot of shops in Lynked in town. Every hero bot has their own shop, but you're not always just buying things. In Mason's shop, you're crafting or recycling. In Smithy's shop, you're forging weapons. So having a few layers that were constant through all these shop action buttons, but then trying to find like the diegetic action and then recording it and digitizing it a little bit to have it still feel like a button, but feel a little realistic as well. So these are all the shop menu buttons. And this is where the toast went. Well worth it. Another example of this was the Banner of the Spark in Lynk's world. The Banner of the Spark is kind of this mysterious guild of robots who have disappeared to time, and you're kind of finding them throughout the game. So their interface, where you do a lot of your perma-progression upgrades, is still interfaced with your buddy system, but because it's kind of this mysterious lost-to-time society, I took those foundations of the UI system, added longer reverb tails, slightly breathier synths to them. And this has been a mostly creative talk, but just a quick note on the technical side of implementing this UI stuff. The UI got tricky with this game. Most of our UI team came onto FuzzyBot pretty late in the process, and they, with impressive speed, kind of stood all these systems up very quickly, but it was quick. And things changed very quickly. The main issue with the UI ended up being that when you open the menu, it tried to play the sound for everything that was focusing, but things didn't all load in at the same time. So, for people familiar with Wwise, if you have a bunch of sounds trying to play at once, it's very easy to say this sound has the highest priority. If it's playing, don't play any of these other sounds. They were not popping in at the same time. They were, and then they weren't, and they were like milliseconds off, so that the hierarchy priority thing didn't work, but if you tried to cut them off, it was like clicky and artifacty, and it didn't sound very nice. So the solution that I came up with that was able to kind of scale forward for further changes in the UI system if they did happen, this was the one night that I worked really late, was everything was great, and then Friday at 5 p.m. before the beta went out, I logged in and everything was broken. So this system came up with to kind of help going forward. The main crux of it here is that this navigation pool has a global limit of 1 on top of it. That's where the priority really comes into play. And the top priority container in any of those, each menu had its own version of this hierarchy to customize different menus different ways. There was a random container that just had silence in it. It was like 0.3 seconds of silence, and it had a priority of 90. And that was attached to its own event, so that in any blueprint, I could go in and be like, okay, the menu opens here, and then the things stop loading in at this point. And I can say, when everything stops loading in, kill everything. And if you play this silence that's a little longer than a millisecond, then you're able to have that silence play over all these other sounds and cancel them out as like kill newest sounds. Because if it was no sound, it wasn't able to cover that, but the short amount of silence was able to cover it. And this mostly worked, which was cool. So, big takeaways from all this sound design stuff. Planning ahead saves lives and scope and time. It's really, really worth it to take a step back when you know you're about to go on kind of a big system or subject in your game and figure out the best way to do it, the best way to think about it, because it will save you time in the moment and going forward. Retro-futuristic problems require creative solutions. Sometimes you have to do something stupid, like reamp all your guitars with metaphorical guitar chains, and then it works, and that's fun, and you had a good day. If you want to make God laugh, tell the UX UI team your plans. Just, be prepared for things to change and try and make systems that you understand well enough to go with the flow on those changes as best you can and adapt to them when they happen. And of course, the most important rule in anything, have fun. And that's my time, so I'm going to hand it over to you guys.